everyone, welcome back to Player One vs. World and for another episode of Fireside with A&A, a monthly podcast show exclusive to this YouTube channel. And obviously, I'm Adnan. Abby's here. Abby, hello.
Hello.
Hello. So is this episode 3? 4? Episode 3?
Gosh.
Episode 3.
Is it episode 3?
I think so, yeah, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is our last episode that comes out. For obviously, it's our only episode. It's a monthly show, this anyway, and this comes out just before Double Exposure releases. So there'll be all kinds of variation of topics we talk about. If there's anything spoiler related, we will say it's going to be spoiler in that section, and then also in the timestamps as well. I'll put like a spoil, just mark it as spoiler and no details with it. So do keep that in mind. But I've kind of been taking a bit of a hardline stance of trying not to spoil anything from the first 2 chapters of the Ultimate Edition because that was a disgusting cash grabbing tactic from Square Enix and I don't support it. I haven't bought it. I've probably saved a lot of money from that, and I've told people as well repeatedly you should have listened as well, because it's my biggest line at the minute, Abby, which is I told you so. But we'll come on to that in a little bit. Anyway, before you start, if you are new here, please do consider dropping subscribe to the channel, turn notifications, like the video, and share with friends. Helps keep up to date with the content on this channel, helps keep up to date with these episodes which come to YouTube, among many other things. And as well, you can check out that other content, including podcasts, interviews, etc., because we're full in swing of Life is Strange season, and we're here back as well. And if you are new here, this is a very much an unscripted episode, unscripted show where we talk about all kinds of different things. So Abby, where do we kick things off?
My goodness. Well, speaking of tagging your spoilers, thank you so much for doing that reliably, because I saw there's like a very popular YouTuber who covers Life is Strange. I don't know if I should say his name, but
No, it's not. I think I know who you mean.
It's the big one. And I got a big headline basically on my YouTube recommended page with a huge spoiler. And I was like, oh, great. You know, it's one day in of the early release and already it's spoiled. So we love that.
Yeah, I think I know who you mean. But yeah, like literally, like even the tweets have been like for Strange Cast, it just says this: there is no spoil. I've not even captioned them with like the topics. It just says there is no like spoilers for the first 2 chapters of the Ultimate Edition, because like whether you're excited or not, it's like I've just kind of like left it to the point where it's like you need to go and play it yourself. And I hate the fact that this game has come out 2 weeks early for 2 chapters, which still makes no sense. When someone explains that to me, I'll give you £1,000 cash in hand. Like when there's a logical reason for it and a definitive reason for it, I believe it. And then on top of that, like the game has like leaked over the weekend. We're recording on the 25th of October. On the Friday, someone has got an early copy, apparently from 4chan. Don't go on 4chan as well, because I've seen some wild stuff. I only recently went on it, but like I've seen like, you know, everyone's now figured out what's happening in this game. And again, we'll be very careful about certain things. But as I said, there'll be spoilers marked on certain sections. We won't start a conversation with an immediate spoiler, because I'm trying to keep people as much as like in the God hope that they can play this game without being spoiled. Which, by the way, is impossible as well, Abby, because like as you just said there as well, this was my big beef with this, which was the fact that when they were like, oh, on Twitter, use the secrets of Caledon University tag. And it's like, okay, cool. But what happens when you go on TikTok and you scroll and you randomly pop up a video, or you go on YouTube and an algorithm pops you up a Life is Strange video? It doesn't work. It doesn't work in the day and age now. It's like you could probably tried that 20 years ago, but not a chance. You watch one Life is Strange video, it's like, you know, it's going to pop up, you know, somewhere else. And do you know what as well? Because I keep talking here as well. One thing that really irked me about this as well, we put a post out on Instagram saying we won't be posting any spoilers from the Life is Strange Ultimate Edition. And I'm not only like the last couple of days, our Instagram count's gone back up in terms of followers. I was losing so many followers per day on Twitter and Instagram. And it was infuriating, because it's like when you're a small account as it is already, to gain followers is a hard thing to do. And when you're consistently posting, you like, you know, you live and die for like 1 or 2 people following your account. I was so angry seeing Instagram fall. We like fell from like 595 or something to like 580 in the space of like 2 days. And it's like, it just kept trickling down, because every time you post something, I imagine someone's like, I'm going to unfollow this because it's going to be spoiler related. But thankfully, most of the, like more or less most of the content has been spoiler free. And I think there's like been like 1 or 2 surface level tweets about like what's happened in terms of the discourse. Because otherwise it's like, you know, it's a bit difficult not to kind of talk about Michelle, for example, tweeting about things, because it's like he's talking about like death threats and stuff, and it's like it's important to kind of highlight that. Yeah, it's been a wild time. But do you want to start anywhere? Do you have anything you want to pick up first?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's an interesting point that you made, that it's hard to hide all of the spoilers, because even narrative employees, like we're like people on the narrative team, have made some thinly veiled kind of general posts about things that can kind of lead you to ascertain what may have happened.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's been tough to avoid spoilers, and as you know, I don't have a PlayStation, and I was thinking of buying one, but yeah, I just didn't think it was worth the plunge just to play it 2 weeks early, so I'll just wait.
Yeah, and because it I just don't know how you avoid something like that because it's like, for example, even when like Game of Thrones was at its like, height of like popularity of TV show, I remember like people in America would watch it first. The people in the UK would try and stay away from the internet for the entire day because they'd go to that their 9 to 5 job and they want to come back in the evening and want to watch it. But it's like, how do you dodge the internet for the entire day? And then also as well, it's that algorithm thing. You watch one Life is Strange video, you are 100% going to get recommended a double exposure video. And I've always said this to people as well. It's like they kind of intentionally do that as well, like algorithm companies, because you're going to get angry. You're going to go and comment on the video, or you're going to go and comment on there. Then someone's going to pick a fight with you, and then you'll come back to it because you'll pick a fight with them. It's the engagement game. Like they always want you to be on the platform in some way, shape, or form. Like AI doesn't care about your feelings or your emotions or if you're going to get spoiled or not. They're all about just engagement. They care about you being on the platform as much as possible. That's why they'll send you the notification, be like, X person has shared something on Instagram for the first time in like 5 years. And it's like, they just want you to come on the platform because once you're on there, adverts, targeting, etc. It's a nasty side of social media, nasty side of certain platforms as well, which I won't name by name. But yeah, I generally think that as well, you can't escape. I think the controversy that's come from Double Exposure's Ultimate Edition has just shown that you can't avoid having stuff like this because the backlash that's come from that, among many other topics that have happened in between it, that's been so newsworthy that people have been covering it actively and then like disregarding the spoilers. And it's like, even on Strangecast, me and Adam, like we've gone completely blank on all the topics as well. And you probably come there expecting us to talk about it, but like, no, we're going to try and stay as much away as possible. I don't care about the views. I don't care about like whatever. It's like that'll come in due course because we will do a review episode or we'll do like a conversation about this kind of stuff. But it's almost difficult to kind of like dodge this kind of stuff. You're going to get hit. And honestly, I know enough about this game anyway. I've like got it, like as people have kind of become aware now on Twitter, it's like I've been spending months speaking about it, like learning the game, the details, etc. So like half the stuff that happened that didn't even like surprise me or faze me. But it's like I was like generally casually scrolling through things. I was like, yeah, not a chance, because if I was trying to dodge this, I would have been spoiled about 4 or 5 times here. And I'm wondering if anyone has actually got to the finish line yet and be like, I'm not being spoiled. 3 days from launch, because it seems like everyone is freaking talking about this game in one way, shape, or another. Yeah, very poorly handled marketing, very poorly executed, like getting a game out there. Again, I still don't understand the appeal of getting it out 2 weeks early. Like even the conversations died down after probably the first 2 days when people played it. And the likelihood is you're probably going to play it again just to refresh your memory, just to kind of get like, before the game comes out.
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not overly convinced by that.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of outrage marketing because, yes, maybe you'll get attention in the moment, but it's not sustainable. And from what I've seen personally, it doesn't excite me about the game, so it makes me want to hold off on purchasing as much as I can so I can maybe
Mm.
catch a sale or something.
I think most people are now as well. I think when the reality is checked in, because I don't think it was even I don't even think the marketing was like, trying to I believe it's FOMO marketing that they've really driven it off of, because I think like there was a big portion of like Chloe Price Max fans, Price Fielders, etc., who have really wanted to know, because like the marketing was like misleading them in places. Like they felt the marketing was misleading them. They felt like the clear message wasn't sent there. And like we warned people for like months on the podcast and stuff. We were like, don't buy into it because we know what's going to happen. This is going to be great for Square Enix. Like their margins are going to be bigger. Like if you think about it, $80 game is going to look much better sold than, for example, a $50 game. You almost like double the value of it, more or less there, because like there'll be quite a few people who've bought it. And I know people have kind of like already sat there being like, okay, cool, I got to play it. But then it's like, I feel like if I would have held on to that extra bit of money, I would have had that. And it's just a really bad practice, isn't it? Come on. It's like, if for me, it just screams that you don't have any faith in your game, that you're releasing it early and trying to get like a, buzz of like momentum of being like, oh, fans are going to talk about it and people are going to try and convince you to buy it, because it's not like the first Life is Strange. It's not like the Before the Storm. Like those were episodically built. Like they did development during each of the episodes, and they can take feedback on, for example. So it's like when Life is Strange was like trying to defend it on Twitter, being like, yeah, we try to do this so like, you know, people can go on theory crafting scenarios and you can do this. I'm like, funnily how this was never done for True Colors, and it's theory crafting scenarios, and you released a double, you released a True Colors Ultimate Edition, which had the bundled copies of the remaster collections, which you botched, but you never did the theory solution before, did you? And released it 2 weeks early. But as I've warned people before, you buy this stuff, you allow it to become a norm for people. People make it an established practice, and this is what Square Enix is now going to probably do for the future. You know, in whatever way, shape, or form with their games and stuff, they will make this a practice, which is like, you know, you're going to be paying for 2 weeks early access to play 2 weeks, two of the
Yeah.
chapters early, and it's like, I just don't support. I'm fed up with video games. I really am. I'm trying
Well,
to just like.
some might say that they're trying to double their exposure.
There we go. See, I love a good pun, and that's perfectly timed.
The podcast is done now. No, I'm kidding.
We're only 10 minutes in. If it was near the end, that would be a brilliant way to end this. But no, yeah, I think your experience so far from dodging what's been seen and stuff, that's quite like, I think that's probably reflective of certain people, and it's quite impressive that you've been able to do that, because like, as I said, those podcasts doing the strange cast and stuff, when it's compiling news, it's like keeping this out and keeping that out, and then a couple of like very surface level conversations. But even then, I felt like we was spoiling certain things for people. But then again, people wanted the conversations to be heard so they can come and comment. Even in the comments, I was like, even like top comments, I was like, please do not put spoilers of Life is Strange Double Exposure Ultimate Edition in here. And you see one or two people reply, then I'm like, please edit that comment before I delete it. Because it's like, I'm not going to stop you from having I'm not going to censor you from having conversations about a topic, but again, it's trying to read the room, see how other people feel, and it's like, it's even my Twitter platform as well. It's always been like, you know, people can engage with it. It's like, we're not going to shut down the debate. Just don't threaten to kill someone or do something else like that, because that is where threatening and harassment is like where you draw the line on stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
But more so, you have to share things in the public interest and like for people to have conversations and discourse. Look, there's a fine line with it, with like that, because like I don't get how you can't see why people would be angry or mad. It just doesn't make sense to me, because it's like the iconic flagship characters like of the established thing, even if they've only really been in one game and stuff, it's like, I don't know, like taking a duo and breaking them up. It's like, you know, so having Keenan and Kel and just having Keenan in a show, or it's like, you know, any other famous duo you can have in history, breaking them up and then not giving people a good enough reason to do that. I don't blame people for feeling the way that they have and the way they reacted, because like, I've always spoken to I spoke to one of the guys I know, Jace, and he was like explaining to me when we were like met up for the first time. He was saying to me like, Chloe's like a big LGBTQ plus character, someone who young people probably when they played the first Life is Strange back in 2015, which is almost a decade ago, saw and they related to in different ways. I was kind of like, I didn't even think of that take at first when he told me, because I was like, that's interesting you mentioned that, because I'd never really went down that route. And then when this game came out, or the way the game is coming out with all the stuff for double exposure, I was kind of like, okay, now I kind of get why she's so important and why they see it from that perspective. So when you take that away from someone, the reaction is going to be quite severe, and it's like within the realm of what they're doing, because like they feel their agency has been ripped out from this game, which I don't blame them as well, because that's probably one of the best things about this first Life is Strange as well, which is the fact that it's the ultimate agency given to any character, which is Max Caulfield, because ultimately when you make the last decision in the first game, and this is not a spoiler, don't worry about that, when you make the decision in the first game, whichever universe you decide, whichever decision you make, then you make your own story in your head. And it's like, how do you really write that going forward without disenfranchising two different sets of people? But I can kind of get why they would get very angry seeing the way the story and the direction has gone on double exposure so far. And obviously from the leaks as well, seeing more, but like, you know, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, you had brought up to me too that Chloe is a really iconic LGBTQ character. And there's this trope in media that's been talked about for years called bury your gays. So like a lot of LGBTQ characters in media, you know, TV shows, movies, etc., are typically killed off. Like they're kind of used for their plot line, and then people fall in love with them, and then suddenly they're gone. And this feels a little bit like it's playing into that trope. And I just want queer characters to be happy. That's all we ask for. It could have been so easy, and they could have created such an interesting and fun story.
Is is that trope like has that been a long running trope, like an established one? Because I've never heard of it, but it does kind of like start to resonate when you say it now because I start seeing it. But has that been like a long running trope that's been talked about?
Yes, it's been talked about a lot in like LGBTQ research and just kind of media talks. Um, but yeah, you look at a lot of LGBTQ characters, and I would say especially this was like very concentrated between maybe 2013 when those characters started becoming more mainstream, and maybe 2019. And then I think after that, there was kind of a conscious move, not necessarily a movement, but an effort to make queer characters have happier storylines, essentially.
That's interesting. I never really thought about it. Do you know? Because I saw some like memes where they're joking about where it's like, you know, I think it was like kind of referring like, you're a lesbian when like your girlfriend breaks up with you and you talk about her all the time, and it's like you have like a different. Is that like a trope or something? Because it's like that's one thing that I kind of don't understand with the Chloe Max story, because like you could make an argument that Max and Chloe are just partners, for example. Like if you go with that choice in the ending where it's like the two of them go out there, it doesn't necessarily have to be a love relationship. I'm talking about in even outside what the creators say and stuff. I'm saying like you can make a kind of thing where it's like I'm so close with this person and as a friend, we're just going to keep it completely platonic. But obviously, the logical decision is people think that that blossoms into something more with Max and Chloe. But like, is that something else that kind of weighs into the fact that like why people might feel this way? Because like obviously, if you do what they're doing double exposure and they kind of like create what they have done in there, wouldn't you kind of want more of a story focus on the fact that that is a fun thing about like in terms of like that kind of thing from the gay side, which is in terms of like the characters are broken up and like you kind of have them talking more about someone, because it feels like weird that she doesn't talk about this character more in this game. It's like, why is she not talking about this character? I don't get it.
Yeah, that is also kind of a stereotype that you just stay friends with your ex forever, like your ex is your best friend. And especially I think in this situation, Chloe and Max would be best friends. And of course, I don't know how the writers identify, but I think it begs the question like were there LGBTQ writers in the room? And I'm sure there were. You know, knowing Deck Nine and their history, I'm sure that there were, but it just doesn't feel true to life. And maybe that's the point that this game is not true to life. It's a fantasy game. Um,
Mm.
but
I
yeah, I don't know.
I think based on what Deck Nine is, I think that's like their most diverse area, to be honest, in their studio, because it's got
Yeah.
Fish Kwan, who's the narrative director. Aisha Farah is working in that game. Mallory Littleton's working that game. I won't mention that again. Elizabeth Blau worked on that game. Like quite a few people that worked on that from different backgrounds and stuff. So I think it is actually probably like one of more their diverse teams in Deck Nine. Just on like having snooped around for as long as I have on people's profiles and stuff, it was the one that was kind of like a bit of a standout. But I don't think they've really done it justice, personally speaking. I think that this is kind of like it's being blown up in their face among many other things. Um, yeah, I'm not too sure, but again, this kind of goes back to that IGN article, which is about the fact that Square Enix doesn't see this as a gay game. The shotgun like kind of thing is like, and then this kind of like this the decisions they're going through with double exposure. I'm like, well, it kind of makes these kind of things are now coming more and more apparent just from an allegations article that IGN published. So I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm not surprised what they're doing there. Um, yeah, I'm kind of like, this game's going to be something, man. It's going to be
Yeah.
something. I could write theses on this. I could write books on this probably. I might have to write a book at some point about this because I just don't.
So,
Like, it's created its own lore. Like the fandom has like created its own like lore from it. It's like everything. I've never seen something. I've been genuinely serious as well. I've never seen something so catastrophically handled by marketing. Like genuinely speaking, I'm not even taking a swipe at Square Enix for the sake of it. Could you name me anything else that's been as catastrophic on the level of like marketing? Like there's just been things where people have been like, it's been like a red flag from the beginning, because I was kind of post this now on Twitter. It was like 2 months ago. The entire like Life is a Strange cast episode says, "Is Life is Strange marketing a red flag?" It was like what I was thinking about for since like June when they revealed. It's like something doesn't sit right here. It's like all these things are like negatives. And it's like even in between the marketing, there'd be like a video of Hannah Telle with cats, and I'm like, oh, that's adorable. However, there's still something quite sinister about like the marketing with that, because it feels like they're using Hannah Telle to make everyone feel like, oh, it's Hannah Telle, we love her, and we all love Hannah Telle. Obviously, that's the motif everyone's had. But it's
Mhm.
like we're just disregarding everything else and we're just sweeping it under the rug. And it's like I don't think you can sweep this like controversy that under the rug because it's that big. It's like it's almost like 50% your player base almost.
Yeah. Yeah. But how great is it to have those kind of touchstone people like Hannah Telle that can cure any ill?
Yeah, that's essentially their green flag in the marketing, which is the only like if I was gonna make this game, I would probably have made every material around her. Like even if it was like, you know, we're gonna get backlash, I'm like put Hannah Telle at the end of the video for like 30 seconds because no one's gonna say anything bad about her because she's great.
Yeah.
She's wholesome, she's innocent, she's like she is Hannah Telle. So it's like ultimately, I think the consensus has been made with even the backlash of this game. People are like, I love Hannah Telle, so I'm not going to. I'm like, you know, and I'm happy for her. And even on Instagram as well. Like, I'll be honest as well. Like, I'll be honest because like she finally followed us on like the Instagram, and I love you, Hannah, if you're watching this. Um, she like followed us like this year, and I'll be serious when I'm posting things as well. I'm more like a bit more cutthroat on Twitter and Facebook, all this other stuff. Even on Instagram, I sometimes don't put stuff on there because I don't want her to see it because I don't want her to feel like she needs to be upset about it. But it just feels bad though, doesn't it? Because it's like it's not even against you, and no one's even gone after her, which is the funny part, which is the right thing as well. It's not funny, but like the right thing, which is the fact that no one's going after her because it feels like I've kind of said it myself. I feel like she's being stitched up a little bit by like what's actually gone on in here because it's like for her, it's the dream role of a lifetime. And it's like, you know, to come back as Max. And it's like she has had no say over anything really, like per se. It's like nothing has really been influenced by her. And I
Mhm.
feel so bad for her because I was talking about this on Twitter. Like when Don't Nod made Life is Strange 2, Gonzalo Martin would tell them certain words, like, you know, how to say enano, and they would take his feedback on board because he has a heritage with these characters. Why
Mhm.
wouldn't you listen to him? But then you watch stuff in double exposure, and it's like clearly, Hannah Telle needed 5 or 10 minutes just to say to the writer, this doesn't work. Can you phrase it in this way? And even when you watch panels and the writers are like, well, we heard Hannah say this and we had to change it in a certain way and write a certain way. I'm like, but why don't you ask her first? Like she's the character, she's
Yeah.
embodying the character. You need to listen to her because it's not that she's going to write Max's story. It's about you needing to get off your ego warp here. Come down to level and be like, actually, I'm writing this character for her because she is the embodiment of this character. And she's now gonna have to give me feedback because we're making a different Max, a different age, and it needs to match the style of what we're doing here. And only she can tell me that this sounds like very Max because personally speaking, you've seen some of the stuff so far. I think that's the thing that's carrying this game at the minute, which is the actors, especially Hannah Telle, is really trying to deliver really clunky lines because it's like that doesn't sound like Max. That sounds like someone who's trying to write something and sound smart and clever, and they try to throw in like Gen Z slang, and it's like you clearly aren't because you're some like 40 year old person writing in the writing team. And it's yeah, but come on, Abby. It's like me if I was trying to write for Gen Beta. Imagine if I was writing for Gen Alpha. Like, come
Yeah.
on. Imagine me like throwing some like slang out there. I'm like, oh,
Oh
slay
my
Abby.
god.
Exactly. Come on, like exactly. Imagine if I was like using slay and like this podcast, like slay guys. It's like, come on, that doesn't work,
Hey,
man.
fellow kids.
We have to like show our ages for what they are, and it's like this is the problem with like the double exposure stuff that I've seen so far. It's like literally in the marketing, she's the only thing where I've not seen things get dunked on. Maybe Tessa Rose Jackson as well with the soundtrack. I think like that's the other positive that they've had. But other than that, like I when people like my conversations have been with people, I always try and play devil's advocate. This one's like almost the most impossible devil's advocate situation because
Mhm.
everything has gone wrong from square one, no pun intended. Um, has gone wrong from the beginning, has been fatally flawed, and then they've not even had the goal to walk back on certain things. And that's what's going to hurt them now because where they're going, what they're doing with this, honestly, I can't, I just don't think you can't take fan feedback on board because, like, this isn't just a small 25% of the fan base. This is like a large proportion of the fan base, like, including also ones from LGBTQ plus backgrounds, also
Mhm.
just generally people who like both characters, etc. I can't. I don't understand how you can't. Something's not right here. Something just doesn't
Yeah.
feel like it feels weirdly wrong, man. It feels weirdly wrong.
Yeah. Well, and just putting on my PR crisis hat, I think bringing back some of the cornerstone people who made the franchise so successful to begin with might be really helpful and might be a panacea to this issue as they're developing more games ostensibly around this franchise.
Mm.
So I think that could be really helpful to them because they see people won't necessarily give that backlash when Hannah is involved in something, for example. Yeah, so maybe that's what they need to do, is just bring back some key folks.
It's funny that you say that because, like, obviously, I don't think the Donut team will ever work with them ever again because it
No.
just doesn't seem like it's a possibility. Because I always said, like, with the remaster collection, when the criticism started coming out, I was like, you could have easily had like Michelle as like consultant on those games, and it would
Yes.
have added so much credence to the game. Had he accepted to it, that was a different scenario. But had he been involved with it, his name adds credence to it and more kind of like that thing. And you're right as well, because if you bring back key people, they do add value to your game. So it's like even with Deck 9 as well. Deck 9 looks very differently from where it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Like people have been like going and coming. Even like Garrus, for example, I know people just started dunking on him because of what's happened in the IGN article.
Mhm.
There's more to that as well. There's a lot more to that. People thought like that's why I dispute some things the IGN article, because I've spoken to enough people about Zach Garrus, and like this guy was considered a creative genius at Deck 9. They thought he was like one of the greatest things that ever happened there, and like that's down to like different interpretations. So like I won't go into Garrus debate; that'll be a different
Yeah.
conversation. But from what I know, he was considered like a genius among many other things. But you're missing all those people, and as you said as well, like my hot take has been and has always been as well, and this is going to age like fine. Why I said it on one of the podcast episodes. I said that Emma Vicelli should have been one of the writing consultants in this game.
Absolutely.
She worked on,
Should have been one of the writers.
and in itself as well, she wrote 6 arcs of the comic. So she wrote 6 books of Max and Chloe on that Titan series. It wasn't 6 books; it wasn't even intended to be that, but she carried it for like years and years. And it's like Max ages a little bit, and obviously it's not as big of a time jump, but I'm like, she's the only person outside of Michelle, Jean-Luc, and many other people who worked on Max in the first Life is Strange, who has worked on Max, and then they've, even whatever people think of the comics, for example, universally, people thought Max was really tonally kept right. She always kept on point with that. And I don't get why you just didn't bring her on. Even, I'll make the admission here as well. When I met Emma Vicelli at Traveling Man, when I went and met her and got my photos and stuff, I told her that even in person, I was like, they're going to rue the day that they don't bring you on as a consultant. I was like, I don't understand how you can tell me here when I'm talking to you that you knew of this project, but you're not involved in it. And I'm sitting here myself saying to you, how are you not involved in this project? Because
Yeah.
you should have been writing Consultant 101. And it adds so much more credence to this immediately, because people are thinking, hey, she's actually done really well. Look at what she wrote with that Chloe and Max story. But again, that might be the reason, because she wrote a different story from that. So they were like, maybe we're not going to do that. But I agree with you completely. You need key people. You need people involved with it, because Stauder came into Deck 9 after True Colors. Jonathan Stauder, the game director, came into this project after True Colors. So he's never worked on a Life is Strange game. He's worked at Telltale. He's worked on Batman and stuff. But, some of the series he's worked on as well, some of those games I'm not really like, marveling away at, because Telltale has not been that great in those years, if anything. Felicia Kwan has worked on parts of this in the narrative capacity. I don't really rate her. I've seen a lot of her writing on like certain parts of that series that Deck 9 have worked on. She's not one of the better writers in that series as well, and I don't know how she's got to narrative director role. And then you look at other people. I'm like looking at other people. Like the only person that I know, for example, who's like a really key long-term member is Webb Pickersgill, who's doing the performance direction. And
Yeah.
Webb did performance direction on True Colors. He also did Before the Storm's co-direction. So it's like it's the only like really key figure that's still there that's like making like a more of a noticeable impact and like a more of a high profile figure role. So that's what, as you said, like that's a big problem that happens with key figures not being in this game. It's like, man, I'm just like, I don't know, man. There's something just not. This has been like disaster 101, but for also all the wrong reasons, because this was Max Caulfield's homecoming, and it felt like if you were ever going to touch that character again, you better have a goddamn good reason to touch Max Caulfield again. Like that's my issue with it. So it's like you need to sit down and think about why you're going to go with it. And this is what Michelle has tweeted about as well on Twitter. When people are asking, he's like, if I'm going to make it, he's like, I need to sit down and think about what am I going to write? And that's like, bingo, because even he as a creator is thinking like, how does her story play out if I go back to it? And it's the biggest irk I've had since the very beginning of this game announced, was because I was like, why is she using her powers? Like, why is she using... It irks me, man. It irks me because it's the ultimate player agency. Like, you establish a reason why she stopped using her powers in one timeline. And it's like, even in the timeline if she doesn't as well, there's still a repercussion of knowing why she's... annoying.
Well,
It's not an evolution of power.
Yeah, there would need to be a good reason for using the power again, and you would have to look at what is the existing trauma there from having used that, and what was the outcome the last time. So,
Mm,
did we have a good outcome from using the power, and is that a good enough reason to touch it again? You know? But I
yeah.
don't know. I also haven't played the game, so when I do play it, I'm going to be well, of course, we haven't played the game because it's not even officially out yet at this point. Um, but yeah, I'm going to play it through the lens of this is a different game. This is not the character I know. This is the character from maybe like a different universe, but this is a different game.
So, funnily enough, I'm not going to take credit for this myself. I don't know their user's name. I haven't got their profile up, but they gave a really good take out of it. And they said that Max is like meeting Max again in this game is like meeting a stranger. And it's like, it's like meeting, and it feels like that. It's like Max, when I look at Max in this game, it feels like that favorite woolly hat that you had. And you put it back on, and something just feels a little bit wrong here. And it's the same with when I see her as well. 'Cause it's like Max is there, Hannah tells the voice. She's a bit
Yeah.
older. And it's like meeting an old acquaintance, an old great friend, and you shake hands with them, and you're like, but they feel like a stranger, and that's what she feels like. Because ultimately, that's what's happened though, because you stripped her of agency. She doesn't have any agency. You can't pick from one ending that she is the Max that you've done because they've intentionally positioned her as a soft reboot. She's like hollow a little bit, so it's like she has surface level history. So you can be a newcomer to the series, play this game, and you can get attached with her, and then you can kind of go and explore her history. But she has very surface level history in her identity, her history. That's a big problem because again, this game is related to player agency. The first Life is Strange is a coming of age story. End of. I don't take any other argument. Don't Nod repeatedly said this in the marketing even more so than Square Enix. It's a coming of age story. The murder mystery element is secondary. Even the relationship with Chloe is secondary. And I'm talking about in the sense that the focus is always on Max being a coming of age story. You could argue that obviously Chloe's story is important because it is part of the coming of age story, but it's the important part, coming of age story. So that's why you connect with Chloe. That's why you connect with this thing happening. That's why you connect with this, because you're always as Max. You're giving yourself as a perspective of Max, and you're enjoying all these great relationships you form, including obviously with Chloe Price. And you can't strip people away from that. It makes no sense. It's like going from, you watch Star Wars.
I watched Star Wars, yeah.
Yeah, it's like going from A New Hope to Empire Strikes Back, and Han Solo's not there, and the film is basically just set around Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker, and everyone's sitting there thinking, "Where's Han?" And you don't, and he just becomes like a transparent voice in the background, but you don't see him, you don't hear. It doesn't work. You have to give reason to do it. So even for example, I was thinking about this recently. I don't really like the game series, if anything, but like Last of Us Part 2 and all the uproar that happened with it and everything else. Have you played it?
No, I haven't. Also, sorry if you hear a ruckus in the background. My kitten is being crazy.
We're a cat friendly podcast. We're all about cat content on this channel. It's all free as well
Yes.
on top of that. So like in The Last of Us as well, like there's a lot of backlash that happened with one of the characters, Joel, who was the main character in the first game.
Yes.
Spoiler if you haven't played it, God damn it if you haven't played it. He gets killed, and then people are upset with that. I had my own issues with Last of Us. It's more than just killing Joel. That's just like pointless. But they basically set the entire game off about Ellie going on this revenge warpath / vengeance warpath, more revenge. You could have had more of a goal, for example, just basically saying, actually, we're going to start from the Arcadia Bay ending, the Bay ending with Chloe Price, and Chloe gets killed. And then Max gets set off on a warpath to go on revenge. It works because then you feel her agency, you feel her thing, because then you can see what's being snatched away from her because you feel it yourself. I'm writing really bad fan fiction here. And then even if you wanted to as well, you could probably, like, once Chloe's being killed, you could throw her into another timeline, and she like ends up in the Bay timeline, which is the one where where Chloe Price has been sacrificed, etc. So you can try like start mashing timelines together. But ultimately, what I'm saying is you have to give reason for it, because then at that point, if people at least see Chloe, they've seen her, experienced her, great, because even if you killed her and there might be backlash or there might be a kind of a bit of a volatile response, people will accept it because you're basically using that to drive the story forward, drive it on trauma, drive it on whatever you want. There's a reason for it. You could even say, for example, that's what triggers Max's power again, because she tries to use it because Chloe's dead in some
Yeah.
really official capacity. That's it. I'm talking to someone who's never written a story. But when I see this as well, and I see these people writing the story, and I'm looking at it just on surface value, and you haven't known about the entire thing, I'm just like, I've never seen more a sloppy mess of a story writing, because like
Um,
there are people in this fandom who write fan fictions, and you can see that the level of detail they go to because they think about the story, they think about all this other stuff, and a lot of this at the minute is being blamed on the writers at Deck Nine and the former writers as well. And I would 100% put the blame in their lap, because it's not about the modeling people who've done like really good set pieces and stuff, the actors who are working with it. It's down to the really bad writing you've done so far, the cringeworthy writing, and then on top of that as well, the really bad story direction you're taking. These are both faults on that team for the moment, from what I've seen. Because obviously, I need to see the game more in action, see how game direction works, if anything. Then maybe my blame will get allocated in different places. But it's just bad storytelling. It's just such
well,
a bad.
yeah, and this has been my critique the entire time that we've been talking, that we've been doing this podcast, is that, and I come from a background of having worked in a game development studio, right? So the mechanism is supposed to inform the narrative,
Mhm,
right? This feels like, oh, this was just a really cool mechanism to have, and let's just like superimpose whatever story we want to tell on top of it. It
mhm,
doesn't make any sense. Why
mhm.
would Max's power be reincarnated essentially? And why is it being redone in this manner? It just very much feels to me like they had this story that they wanted to tell, and I don't quite know how it goes all the way. And then they said,
Mhm.
okay, well, yeah, like let's just throw this mechanic on top of it and call it a day.
Yeah,
And that to me is not the greatest way of approaching storytelling in a video
yeah.
game setting. Um, and again, I'm being generous too with my interpretation because I love this
Well,
franchise. I have a lot of respect for Deck Nine and for Square Enix, and I don't know. My cats
well,
are.
because I don't go on the dunking Deck Nine crew, and I agree with what you're saying, because it's like, for example, I think their Expanse team is very talented. So it's like, have you ever played the Expanse that they made?
No.
100% recommend it. So it's like one of the few things I have, for example, in my experience of like working with covering Deck Nine games. I've like covered it on the channel, for example. I would arguably say I would even make an argument to an extent it could be the one of their best games they've ever made. Even a lot, probably alongside True Colors, for example, because I think their writing team understands how to write characters. So that's a variation of, I think some of their writers might be on this Life is Strange Double Exposure team. But for example, I would have literally just taken all the writers that are working on Life is Strange on the Expanse and put them into this game, because they would have made a coherent story of it, because they understand the characters they're writing with. Because as you've explained there, you have to have all these reasons that come together. It's like a puzzle piece. It has to all fit together to make it happen. And my ultimate issue starts and still stands with the fact that Max Caulfield could be removed from the game and it would make no freaking difference, because it
Yeah.
could. Because even, for example, you could take, because this is the best argument I heard, Abby. Someone was like, Max's power being shift isn't really an evolution. And I was like, when you say that, it does make sense, because like Emma, for example, in the comics, she evolves Max power,
Yes.
pocket time, da, da,
Yes.
da, adds value to it. She's, because like the rewind mechanic always stays at the heart of that, even in the comics, but she advances it. She's like, this evolves. And so, for example, pocket time in the comics, Max can rewind a certain element, not the entire time, but she rewinds a certain
Yeah.
element. A cold cup of coffee, she rewinds that, but everything else stays intact. So it's an evolution of her powers. Shifting, it really isn't an evolution of the power bit, because that just feels like it's a new power in itself. And also, as well, for example, if I took Max Caulfield out the game and put Alex Chen in there, you could easily make the argument that her motion reading power, her empath power,
Yeah.
becomes shifting into a different universe. And then that raises me other questions, thinking, was Alex Chen the protagonist of this game? Or were you thinking about someone else? Or did you have someone else new? You've tried to connect a dot by putting Max into this game and be like, oh, because she has rewind time, she can split universes because we're going to create that power. Don't work like that, because you need a reason for that, like to create something like that. She just doesn't create tears for the sake of it. That's not really her power in the way, shape, or form that you're doing it. A mess, because ultimately, this game is a murder mystery game. It's Cluedo with Max Caulfield in it, because it's not about character focus. It's not about character concept. They keep trying to argue it's about trauma and stuff, but ultimately, that all feels secondary to what a Life is Strange game is. And I think that's where the problems are stemming from this. I think that's going to be a huge issue these guys can't get over as well. And it's going to be shown when people play the game, because I've heard enough about this game. And as I said before, I've never really been worried about spoilers, because I was able to map out all this stuff, go through months of speaking to people, talking to people. And Abby, literally no one I ever spoke to during this game like anyone who was involved with the project in any way, shape, or form said to me this was a good idea. And it's like, truthfully, like all the people I spoke to, all the different sources and stuff, no one said this was a good idea. And like that's like an alarming thing in your head because no one had belief in the product that they're producing. And you might have other people like, well, yeah, this person will say it, but come on, like you've been hiding things from people. You've been doing like, little strategies where you're like referring to Chloe Price as the blue haired girl. And so it's just, but it's frankly insulting though. You're insulting your established fan base because you might try and do it as like a quote unquote market ploy to make newcomers feel like interest in it. But even the blue haired girl doesn't have that much importance to the story. She's not got nothing else added to it. So you're basically pissing off your actual fans, which have found value in this character. And I understand it. I keep hearing from people like, I feel like heartbroken. It's like, I feel for you as well because I know what she meant to you, and you basically been treated because your character has been flung out of the story and is very much on a surface level mention.
Yeah.
Terrible storytelling, poor storytelling.
Yeah. And everything you said is exactly what I was trying to hit at with my comment that the mechanic informs the narrative. The narrative does not inform the mechanic. And you're so right that perhaps they did have an existing narrative that Alex Chen was supposed to be the protagonist or someone else was supposed to be the protagonist. And you could really superimpose any character into this and say, oh, their power has shifted into this time shifting maneuver thing. And it would be the same, which is just unfortunate.
Yeah, and you know what's also unfortunate as well? Why didn't they just carry on with Alex Chen? It felt like that was a good success story for Deck 9. Do you when they made it? Because like even True Colors, I don't remember any backlash really happening. I think people had different expectations from it, different experiences, different receptions to it. But ultimately, I thought Alex Chen was one of the saving graces of that game in terms of like a new protagonist that really emerged in the Life is Strange series who held her own. Like she was Max in certain ways that you could say there's like a lot of similarities being borrowed, a lot of like liberties taken, but ultimately she felt like her own creation. It felt like something that, Deck 9 would be proud of in terms of like a character that they could be like, we've actually created something in the Life is Strange universe that is ours. It feels like that.
Yeah.
And then it feels like, why would you just not carry that on with her? Because it feels like she has the perfect motif to be in this position to go into this game and you make a story around her. But then instead, you decide to go and grab Dopenod's character from 10 years ago or 9 years ago, at least at this time, and then try and make a story around that. But then that has different implications because Alex's story is a little bit more. You have more flexibility, for example. You have more flexibility with the universe, the choices you have, because they're not as definitive. Like there's so many different endings in True Colors. They're not as definitive as the first Life is Strange. There's more liberty with that. So I'm like, why would well, when the people see the game and stuff, I think they'll probably understand why they've done Max. But ultimately, it's just not it was not a very good decision. It was not very poorly. It's been poorly executed for me from the start to finish. And it's like I'm not even hating the game for the sake of it because I will still play it. And there's certain things I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm just ultimately very, very underwhelmed and disappointed because it feels like a very ill-conceived idea. It feels like someone who hasn't sat down and said, I need to really work out why Max is doing this. And that's my problem because I'm looking at him like, Max wouldn't do that. And when people keep saying that she feels like a stranger and they don't feel like they can relate to her, that's like a big, big worrying sign because it feels like if you can't relate to that character, big part of Max's personality is gone at that point.
Well, I think it's not even so much about who's the most relatable protagonist. It's who can we corporatize and use to sell the most stuff. Because maybe Alex Chen as a protagonist wasn't selling like the Doc Martens, right? If Alex wore Doc Martens, would people go out and buy them? Maybe Steph could. People love Steph, but she's an openly lesbian character. And does that align with the vision that maybe the publisher has or what's even allowed in other countries? So let's give it a more generous interpretation. Max is kind of a good neutral character who can sell shit.
God, I hate seeing that when those Doc Martens pull up. I'm like, I close my eyes every time because I'm like, because again, it's not even the fact that the history was with those. It's like when you told me about it and you said it. It's like they don't mention it, so it's like why they're doing it,
Yes.
but you don't have the balls to say it as well, and that's the work. But that irks me though, Abby. Because it's like, look, I know you're trying to champion this cause. Well, say it then. It's like, do you imagine if I was doing it as well? Like if I was trying to like rally some cause for LGBT and you watch my video for like 20 minutes and I didn't mention the reason behind it, but I was trying to like support the cause, you'd probably message me and be like, why don't you just say it? And that's my issue with it. Cause it's like, we know what you're doing there. It's obviously a great partnership you're trying to take. I think in itself, you feel like it feels like for me, you're trying to take advantage of that community and be like, oh, because we put Doc Martens in it, you should buy it. And it's referring to it. But actually, we won't tell you why it's important to the history of it, because
Mhm.
that's just going to get us in a little bit of a trouble with different marketings, because people don't like people from that community. And it really irks me, because that's the issue of it. And it's like, it just feels from start to finish over like commercialize the Polaroid, the Doc Martens, do the Doc Martens, but at least just do that as the sole sponsorship and actually sell it for what it is. It's like, just say it's a connection to this community. We wanted to embrace it. There's a rich history with it. Go and buy Doc Martens for this reason, and it's coming to Life is Strange because we embrace it. Not once has that message been portrayed. Not
No.
once.
Well,
It's not even
that's
mentioned.
what Yeah, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I mean, that's just what tipped me off because it would make sense if you just had the Polaroid sponsorship, right? That makes complete
Yeah,
sense. Max is a photographer. Why is she now selling shoes and very specific shoes that are
yeah.
typically marketed and worn in this community as a specific symbol of being LGBTQ? So that's just what kind of made it feel a little icky to me.
Also, would you not find it valuable that you inform people about it? Because I imagine there's probably like young girls, men, etc., who are growing up who probably don't know the history of Doc Martens. So you're trying to like dangle it in front of them, and these young kids, like teenagers and stuff, will want to play Life is Strange, but then they don't know why you're doing it. So wouldn't you want to inform them, because it would probably help their life a little bit easier? Because if they can associate themselves with this brand, which has obviously got a rich, extensive history of LGBTQ plus people, would you not find that a good message to send? But no, apparently not. We're not going to send that message. Again, that's that issue. It's like, just say it. This is why I've always said, like, in itself now, what ages really well is Life is Strange 2, for example, because I reviewed that when I was in the industry.
Hmm.
And in my first episode, I said that I appreciate the fact that Don't Nod basically we're going to talk about police brutality. We're going to make references to Trump and the wall. We're going to make all these things, but and I said to them, I even remember writing the review. I was like, I admire you more for the fact that you've actually embraced it, because basically it wasn't just a wall, for example, like Michelle was tweeting about and stuff. They were referring to very much politically climatized events that were happening at the time.
Yes.
If you're tiptoeing around it, I would be like, you're not as moral and high as you claim to be, because why are you not talking about what the reference is there? Give it, a bit of like, substance behind it. Don't just say it as a kind of like thing. That's why Life is Strange 2 ages really well, because like when you go back and play it and all the things they're telling you, it's grounded in that reality. So it's like the wall isn't just there for the sake of it. They are really inferring it at that time, which was in that period of like that Trump presidency. They're trying to make you clear about it. Like they're trying to make their position clear about it. And I just said as well, I preferred the fact that they were really honest about it. But then we get to the Doc Martin stuff. I'm like, are you really being honest here? Are you just trying to grab? It feels like for me, you're trying to like grab an incentive off this community, which is like obviously really excited for this game, but you're just not going to really promote their message. You're just being like, oh, there's Doc Martens here. I think it's probably irked other people in that community as well. I feel for them as well. Um, yeah, it's a bit frustrating.
Yeah.
Abby, should I pull up this tweet as well, which we got here?
Okay. Sure.
So I'm going to warn you now. This is a bit more of a spoilery section, so you
Okay.
have been warned. It's going to be marked as spoiler, because it's just impossible to walk through it. And me and Abby were talking off podcast as well, because it's going to bring up a. If you've been following, you might have known my little bit of history with two people on Twitter recently.
Oh
I also
no.
made.
Oh, we're gonna
I
talk about
also
it. Okay.
Yes, we're talking about this. So I made it onto 4chan with this as well. God only help me. So look, it's a secret. It's a Kaladin post as well. You have been warned as well repeatedly. And this is like, again, surface value. This is from Mallory Littleton, who is the former lead narrative lead narrative designer at Deck Nine, who worked on Double Exposure. She put here in a couple of tweets, which irked a couple of people this month. She put here, sometimes relationships that are really important to us don't work out. Sometimes there's no way forward with someone, though you love them. This doesn't diminish the value they held and hold, but life is about learning how to carry sorrow forward into what comes next. We love Chloe Price. We miss her too. But this game is about moving forward, and we invite you to all take that step with Max Caulfield and with us. P.S. For the love of games, I know you deeply care about this franchise, but please do not harass real life people about this. This is supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
End quote. So that was amid a backlash of things as well. If you probably followed me on Twitter as well, I've had my own thing, which was that Mallory Littleton blocked me, and also Player One versus the World, even though we didn't actually tag her. This will also be a strange cast topic as well soon as well, because this will come out on the Wednesday and we'll talk about that. Abby, we had a difference of opinion among many other things off podcast about certain things of that conversation. I don't think that really helped the situation and the tone of it, because those tweets are still up, by the way. Let me just redirect people that you can go and see her tweets. She's left them up. But you go and read those comments and you just see why. It's like, I said this as well. I even put it on my own personal Twitter. I was like, sometimes silence is the best answer, because if you do this, you're going to irk people, because ultimately you don't know what this character means to certain people. And that's the big thing. If you go and do what she's done there, which is she's tweeted about it and tried to rationalize something like that, you're now projecting yourself to the entire internet. They're going to have mixed feelings about this, and they're going to have a very, very different perception on something like that. Abby, what do you? I'll address. Do you want me to address the block, or should I just wait for that afterwards?
We can address it, and I will say we talked about this too before the podcast started, that women have different experiences online than heterosexual cisgender men do. Like, we're prone to a lot of harassment, so I couldn't see how kind of amplifying the tweet might feel a little bit threatening. And look, women have the right to block. Anyone has the right to block whomever they want, right? That's the nature of social media. You can block whoever you want. I think the tweet was neutral, though. You were just amplifying her as a self-identified in her profile former lead narrative writer. That's a narrative writer. It's the same thing. But yeah, she identifies herself as having been the former lead. She wrote an opinion, and it's out there on a public forum. So,
So my defense here is quite clear, which is the fact that, yeah, I agree with you. Anyone can block anyone. I don't have some God-given right to not be blocked by everyone. You can block me all you want. You can block my account if you want. You can block the other accounts as well. I will also say it doesn't really help you, because like I have like burner accounts and all kinds of things, because this is part of my thing with journalism. Because it's the truth though. With journalism, it's like one of the best things I got taught in class were like set up burner accounts. Because it's like if obviously if people know who you are, they're not going to be able to like think it. I'm not doing it in terms of like I want to find out what their dinners are and stuff like that. It's just about keeping a low profile in a different capacity. My defense with that as well is the fact that like that tweet was up for a long time. I think it was up for about at least 8 hours or so before I put it myself. So it had been up there for a long time. I'd basically caught eye of it because other people were reacting with it. There were other people in the community who had really reacted to it and spread it. So my information at that point has become quite late to the story, if anything. I agree with you that maybe I am amplifying it, but I also only have 800 followers while she has a lot more, for example. So it's like I have a very small kind of thing with that. Ultimately, and this is where I stand on this, basically, I've never interacted with her. The account has never interacted with her. Everything on Player One versus the World is neutral from that. I've always been very clear with this. My personal Twitter account is very different. If you look at my reactions, it's very different. Even usually, I stay on the fence. Only recently, I've come off the fence a little bit, but unless I was writing a review or an opinion piece in the industry at any point, that's when I give my personal opinion. Otherwise, I sit on the fence religiously, because there are a lot of things to take from both sides, different opinions, different things you can take away from things. And it's one of the things I got taught very early in journalism class, which was to stay on the fence, because you never know when, if you take one side, something else could come along and it's going to really burn you from it. Now, ultimately, my biggest issue with this, and this is why it's really ironic as well. I mean, also as well, yeah, I get it as well. When you said she's a woman, she's a female. Women can get subjectively harassed with that. The other things I did as well, for example, I've done this with every Deck 9 developer who I've posted on that account. I don't tag them. So I don't tag Stauder. I don't tag Felicia Kwan. I don't tag anyone on that, because it does elicit to people getting more reaction of it. I don't even tag Michelle, for example, or Luke, or anyone else who ever puts anything on that. They are very neutrally driven accounts, because I want people to kind of like, know that they have some kind of anonymity and veil with it. There's no Twitter handle on there as well, so people don't know about her Twitter handle, etc. So I'm very careful about when I post things, because I have to think about in this. My other thing is that mainly is that the fact that it's public interest news. It is ultimately public interest, because you were a forum and narrative designer on this game. It's connected to your job, and you've actively tweeted about this. You've actively put it out there on a public platform. Twitter is a public platform. Private accounts are public. It is a public information domain on there. Whatever you put out there is in availability. Like, for example, I'm not tweeting about your dinner. I'm not tweeting about whatever else you've done or anything else in your personal life. This is directly related to your job, which was a developer at this studio at some point working on this game. That becomes, for me, in my mind, public information that needs to be spread to other people. Am I doing it with malice and intent? No, I'm doing it because it's my aggregate website. If
Yeah.
I didn't cover it on that in that graphic, I would have covered it on Strangecast, for example, because it goes into there as a conversation. We cover Michel's tweets all the time. He talks about things as well because it's going to be important. We'll be talking about his harassment tweets when he's talking about not harassing developers because it is in the public domain. It's public information for us to care about. That's how I feel about it. But the biggest problem I had with it, and this is why I tweet about it as well, and I even got a little bit on my own Twitter account, I just find it ironic that you don't know who I am. You don't know my other account. These are neutral posts and they're being very fair with you, and you block them. But then you have the gall to have an IGN journalist speak with you, whether you went and spoke to them or not, or they spoke to you, and you threw your co-workers under the bus at Deck 9. A lot of people who are very good people. I'm not saying everyone in Deck 9 is perfect, but there are very good people in there who are reeling from the impact that IGN piece had on that studio. And you threw them under the bus, and you didn't respect their privacy, did you? Because, for example, Hannah Telle was hiding in Colorado for X amount of years doing this game. So that's my issue that I had with Littleton doing that thing with it. Well, but that was another conversation. That was probably for the other podcast. But with the issue with this as well, it's like you put these tweets out there. They're still out there in the public domain. She's left them there. So it's like, I don't know what you were trying to gain from that. I don't get what the kind of perception of the tweets were, because you haven't done anything that's achieved anything in those tweets. The only person that has achieved anything in the last 6 months, Abby, in any way, shape, or form, is Michelle, who doesn't even work on this game, doesn't work at any of the studios, the publishers, and came out and said, "Don't harass and people." That's what
Yes.
Mallory should have just said. I don't
Yeah,
get why she didn't.
and that's what we believe too, right? Do not harass
Yeah.
the developers for a video game. Absolutely do not do that. These are real people.
But that's why I just don't get why she didn't say that. She's like, please don't disrespect my colleagues, and don't or my former colleagues, and please don't harass anyone. And but you don't have to start putting other tweets out saying we miss Chloe and it's also time to move on, because you're basically, you see the responses, go through the tweets of her. I would show you, but obviously we know what's happened there. But if you go on her account and go look through the tweets, you'll see. It's just my sense of humor. But you go to her, but go through her account, look at the tweets, look at the reaction you got. I got on 4chan for this, where people thinking. Then the other fiascos happen with former Deck 9 developers, and I'm like, why are you coming from me? Like, what have I done here that's actually perpetuating something? It's like, this is my job. I've done it for 10 years. I've never had this kind of level with anyone on Twitter. We post all kinds of things in my other jobs and stuff. No one has ever said anything. And it's it's public interest news. Even if your account is private, that doesn't mean your tweets are protected, because ultimately you could be posting something that is relevant to a certain piece of information that's important. Again, it's not about tweeting your dinner, for example. It's about the job you hold, which is a public figure, because you are, if you're a developer or designer, you're becoming a public figure, you're working on a game, and you're tweeting that information. That becomes in the interest of public news for people. You can't hide behind that. That's for example, saying Mr. X, as he is a very famous man who dies, for example, and on Twitter, his family puts out a statement, but it's a private account. Should we not share that? And it's like, imagine if you went into a journalist room, in a newsroom, which I've worked in many times, and you went in there and said, "Guys, don't share this." They probably already got the article written and started publishing it by the time you said that. Journalism works very differently from this, and this is why I had a big irk with it, because none of what I did was wrong in any way, shape, or form, and it was that was the issue, because we were relaying important information, and even God Almighty as well. Even though I saw one really weird comment made about me, but even on 4chan of all freaking places, people are questioning why the Deck 9 developers are blocking me, former Deck 9 developers. And it's that's ultimately the position you put yourself in, because you went and did that out of your own accord. And it's you're not actually adding anything else. She could have just said in a tweet saying, "Don't harass developers, don't harass these people, tensions are high, etc., etc., etc." Instead, it was a free tweet thing, which then also antagonizes other people. You go in the comments, you see people angry, and I'm like, what did you achieve from that? You already threw your colleagues under the bus at Deck 9 when you did that piece at IGN with the other people you spoke to, And then you're now putting even more pressure on this kind of project with other people.
Well, the tweet was meant to drive engagement, right? So she's not, as far as I know, their PR representative, right? So
No.
it read like a misguided PR tweet, but you could also see how it was meant to start a conversation, and the conversation was started, right? It had its intended effect. Otherwise, why would you put it out there like that? I think maybe
Is
the more.
it
Go ahead.
is it a misguided PR tweet for herself or the studio? That's the big question.
I don't know. I don't know her relationships or like with people at the studio, with current writers, or maybe she's trying to come back. Also, I'm assuming that she uses she her pronouns, so apologies
I
if I'm.
believe so with Mallory.
Um, but yeah, it just I don't know. I don't think you did anything wrong in my personal opinion. All you did was give a screenshot, or not even a screenshot. You just wrote out the comment that she had written,
Yeah.
and
But
yeah.
no, but that's the thing. 'Cause it's like I've always said this as well. It's always difficult for anyone to put their hand up and say I'm wrong, and I will do that as well. And it's like even I went away from Twitter for a little bit when that actually happened because I was like, I need to think about this, and then went back and I was like, there's nothing wrong that I did that because I've done this many times with other people. And as I said to you before, for example, I've done it with John Stauder's interview. Like, so for example, if that's like out of line, for example, then should I not do the graphics with John Stauder's comments from interviews? Should I not do the ones with Felicia Kwan from comments? They're
Well,
on Twitter, for
exactly. Yeah.
example. So, but
Right.
there's a fine line with it. So it's like for me, it's not misguided. It's not ill. That is comments like the tweet already had more than enough traction where it was on Reddit. It was already on Twitter as it was getting loads of engagement. By the time I got to it personally,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, it had already been visibly seen. You can see the comments. Some people are very passively aggressive to her, and then ironically enough, the comments that I posted on that, as you've seen that tweet, it's neutral. That count stays neutral. It's intended for that because
Yes.
developers follow it, publishers follow it. Like of actors follow it. I've said this before. It stays intendedly neutral because it's reflective of where I do things on journalism. But like my personal Twitter account can be both, neutral, but then also a bit more of a vocal voice. I've intention that was the entire this YouTube channel, the podcast, the shows. It started with I never made it under my own personal name because it's like I don't want that to be the reflection of what it is. It's associated under that Player One versus World umbrella because ultimately that's the reception. That is a neutral source. You come to it and it'll project different opinions from different people across different shows, etc., etc. And then we get to that point. And that's the problem I had with the tweet as well. So it's like, as I said, Bilal's a different story that'll come onto Strangecast or something. And then even the Marie thing that happened with the Deck 9 developer, who was really nice to me at one point. And then, when ballistic and stuff like that, but it's like, as it is, there was nothing there to intend that. I don't understand, for example, and this is the clear cut point I stand with it. Don't put something on Twitter if you don't want it shared, whether private or public, because it's a public platform.
Well,
It
I
is
disagree
an
with that. If you have a private profile, then no, your comments shouldn't be shared.
depends.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the journalistic laws or ethical guidelines are, but I think, especially if they don't identify themselves as someone who's involved in the studio or the writing team or whatever.
Well, the tweet's directly related to it, though. That's the
Well,
thing.
yeah, so in that case, in this specific case, this person identifies themselves as the former narrative lead, and they made a comment publicly on their public Twitter account about
Hmm?
this issue.
So
That's fair
the
game.
Bilal one, for example, that was a privately Twitter account that she had. Yeah.
Yes.
And when she was responding, she responded to a person who was referring to the game in two contexts, and then she replied with a comment with two of them. That becomes public news then at that point. Like it doesn't mean that everyone's going to cover it, but it would become public interest news at that point because ultimately you are not actively tweeting from your private account in terms of just being like it's a comment or a throwaway. You're responding to someone in a capacity where you worked on the game, you have connection to it. And then that comment, it becomes important for people to see. People had already picked up on it before even I tweet on it. Like it's not going to make a difference with that, but it becomes related to it. So it's like I get the line where you're saying with privacy because I agree with it as well. I have a very fine line with privacy. So
Yeah.
it's like I'm not going on her Twitter account and retweeting her dinners or who she's meeting or her personal relationships with people or anything else with that. Or if she's like, for example, attacking another person. It's not that. It's you were directly referring to information about this project as someone who is associated with this project. that unfortunately falls in the remit. For example, within UK laws, at least with me, for example,
Yeah.
that would be public interest news. I don't know. You've said it before with the US; it's very different, but I very firmly stood that. And also as well, I removed it out of good faith to her as well. But then it's like, again, I also went back to the thing, I was like, hang on a minute, you also went and spoke, or an IGN journalist, his better way of putting it, an IGN journalist spoke to you, and you were happy to talk about stuff that happened at Deck 9 in a public IGN piece. IGN's the biggest gaming website in the world. So where's the line here? It's like, how can you call me out for privacy goals, but then you were talking about your project to an IGN journalist and talking about within the remits of that? It makes no sense to me. So it's like, it's hypocrisy at its finest for me, because it's like, you can't say, I want privacy here, yeah, I'll do this. And that's where, for me, it's a very thin line, because you basically last year or this year put yourself out there saying you're in an IGN piece, which is a hit piece on the studio, the publisher, etc., among many other things. And then you're talking about in this tweet, which was very specifically related to Life is Strange. You actively responded to someone who was talking about Life is Strange, and you gave a take, which for me immediately becomes interest within Life is Strange news for me personally,
Well,
at
and
least at
clearly
that
you
point.
follow her account, right? This other
Yeah,
person's account, the private one.
yeah.
And the distinction is that you are not a fluff piece aggregator, right? You're not a
Hmm.
PR representative for this franchise or the folks who have worked on this franchise. You are a neutral news source.
Yeah.
So by allowing, yeah, and that also draws some questions to, if she allows that neutral source to follow the account, then by nature you're allowing them to have access to what you write about the franchise. So
There's also the argument that I followed her before she went private as well. So she was a public platform before that,
there you go.
because
There
she
you go.
locked her account after it as well. So it's like, I was following her for ages. I've been following her for ages. She's obviously made me unfollow me and like block me and stuff, but I followed her platform was public at one point. So I didn't just creep in with a burner account, hide myself and do that. Adnan Riaz 9 has been following her for a long time before that. So she
Yeah.
was a public account at one point. I followed her. I even retweeted her stuff when she got laid off at Deck 9. So for example, here's the other one then. When she got laid off at Deck 9 last year, and she's like, I fell on my shield and sword, and she tweeted about it publicly. Is that not information that gets tweeted? Is that not important information for other people to hear about the fact that she's been a former? Because that was picked up by news sources, by the way. I remember reading tons of Google news sources where it said that the Deck 9 layoffs had happened. Elizabeth Blau was specifically named as well, because she put tweets
Mhm.
out in the domain. There's a very fine line with it, and I get it as well, because I understand myself, because I have to be very, I'm very specific with this, but I don't. For example, if I was going to be malicious, I could send, for example, the private screenshots that I have from my messages with her over
Right,
private DM.
right,
That's malicious. That's unfair,
right.
among many other things. That's not in the remit. That's not public information, because that's a private DM exchange between me and her. Tweets are different. They are in the public domain. So, for example, her account was public at one point. She tweeted about the fact that she got laid off of Deck 9. It was picked up by different news sources. How is that any different from what I'm doing here? And again, it's in the remit that she was a public account. She tweeted about it, and then she's again inferring to a project that she's working on. It becomes news at that point. You can't argue any other way about it, because her opinion is coming into play with it. She can argue, I'm a former Deck 9 narrative person and I'm not involved in this project, so why are you tweeting it? But my graphic specifically outlines you're a former Deck 9 person, but you have influence on the project. And then ultimately, if you tweet about it, you post something about it, you relate something to it, it becomes interest news. We did Emma Vicelli recently about Canon, for example. Is she a Life is Strange comic book writer anymore? No, but she's the Life is Strange comic book writer. What am I supposed to say if she came in my DMs? I'm like, well, Emma, you wrote 6 volumes of the Life is Strange comics. How am I not going to cover this? Because you're important to the fandom of this. However small you are, however big you are, we've done it before. And if in itself as well, it's just the remit of that. You have to be very aware of this as a developer. And she's lucky as well, because, for example, this is just Life is Strange, you know?
Mhm.
This is Life is Strange. She's fortunate with this. If this was a bigger franchise, it probably would have been picked up by bigger outlets. It would have been picked up by other people. Very thin, very, very fine line you need to do with it. I remember, for example, when one of the Tomb Raider games got leaked. It was leaked ironically because it was in I think it was like a subway or something. Someone had taken a photo of the developer's screen on the computer. They're working on the game. The game leaked. That for me is a very fine line. I don't know if I probably say it's unethical, but I don't think it's against the thing, because again, you're in the public space.
Mhm.
It's a hard one, if anything. I get why people might have like come after me or said something like that, but I personally, when I went back and had reflection, I was like, I'm doing no different what I've done for 10 years. I'm not a sleaze bag. I'm not some sleazy journalist that's hiding in like a TMZ style bush or something like that. I'm just relaying news as it is. It's just as it is, an aggregated feed. And ultimately, if you put information on Twitter, which is a public domain, that's what happens though.
Yeah.
What's the difference, for example, her tweeting that someone screenshotting and putting it on Reddit and then they're not to blame for it? But I'm
No,
the person to.
yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I guess PSA to everyone, if Adnan follows you, it is on the record.
Well,
It just
well,
I go
I've been
ahead.
told a lot of things off the record as well, which is always a helpful thing. I take a lot of pride in my sources and my people who I speak to as well. I've given
Yeah.
them years of anonymity and like not ever said anything, but it's about you have to be very aware of it. So, for example, as well, it's like if I started
Mhm.
tweeting something and it was like, so for example, if I started tweeting something that was deeply xenophobic, among many other things, do you not think people would share that, for example, and be like, this guy
I
runs a
would.
YouTube account about Life is
I'd be like,
Strange, and then
not doing a podcast with this guy anymore.
yeah, but that's what I mean. It relates to it as well. I said this before. You have to like take things at face value. Or if I started smearing things like anti-Jewish speech and stuff, and it's like I have two Jewish co-hosts. Well, Adam's Jewish as well. It's like it's not gonna really, you got two Jewish co-hosts. They'd probably sit there being like, "This is a little bit strange, isn't it?" It's like you have to be like it's a fine line. That's unfortunate reality with like those kind of things. They always say be careful with social media. You know it from the US laws as well. It's like don't tweet about stuff when you have an employer and stuff. It'll get you
Yeah.
into some kind of like trouble. And unfortunately, that's the thing with social media. I've always warned people about this because like that has become a news platform in itself now. Because like we now live in the day and age of internet and we break news from social media. Like the amount of stories I could tell you that I do in my other jobs and stuff where it comes directly from social media from a tweet. It'll blow your mind because that's like such an important like platform to use. It's a difficult it's a very fine line, but for me ultimately I'm not going to change because that's what a journalist will think, and a journalist thinks very different from a different person. Like ultimately you probably like think, oh, he's a sleazebag or he's like this and this is that, but that's what journalists will do. They'll take the other option and different route because they'll think of it differently of that. I get
Sure.
when people say respect someone's privacy, but ultimately there's too much interest in that as a public interest news focus piece, especially from Life is Strange community wise as well. That's important to it. It's going to be
Mhm.
shared in that sense. And it was, again, I was within remits of it and it could have been dealt with a lot better, but as you will, if you want to do that, that's your choice. And again, like you are someone who's worked on those projects, you can't really hide away from that. Um,
Yeah. It just felt jarring because you there wasn't informed consent necessarily. It wasn't, "Oh, can I share this to my audience?" But that's not what journalism does typically.
well, it depends, doesn't it? Because, for example, if I was going to tweet her photos, do you not think I would ask her, for example? So if I was going to
Well,
like take, so if it's so, for example, if there's a photo of her in the Deck Nine studio, do you not think I'd probably ask her or something like that? Maybe I would, as a journalist, be like, "Can I have permission to do that?" Like, I didn't nick her tweet, like personally speaking. She put a post out there. I saw it and I took the text from it and put it into a graphic and said, "This is the information that's been relayed to someone."
I don't know, did you
So it's
ask to use
like
a photo?
that was a photo in the public domain.
Okay.
There's
Well,
also an argument.
no laws. I don't know
Well, there's also
all this.
another argument, which is again in like UK news, for example. This is why I always warn people: if you are on Facebook, for example, and you commit a crime, the newspapers will jack your photos, and you have no rights to contest it because ultimately, again, you've put them in the public domain,
Ah,
and it's the truth. Yep, that's what the brutal reality that'll come from it. If, for example, all your Instagram photos, I could go and grab one, and like with where I work, for example, in the UK, and you could try and dispute and be like, "You're doing this." I'm like, "Well, no, you put it on a platform here." So like, not a headshot, for example, like a professionally trained headshot. The photographer might have an IP, but for example, if it was your photo of you and you were taking a selfie and I put it into a graphic, and you start arguing with me, I'm like, "Well, you put it on a public platform, Instagram. I'm not owning the property of the photo. I'm just putting it in as a graphic and being like, this is the person and referring to you." It's a
yeah.
very, very thin line. You have to be very careful of it. And I'm like very, very careful with like what I do with tweets and stuff because like you can get yourself in hot water. In this case, I got myself in hot water for different reasons. But again, I stand very firm on it. And I think a lot of people were fair enough with me in terms of the assessment, which is that they gave me what I think that there was right, which is the fact that I'm just reporting the news and reporting it fairly and ethically. And I get the point where people will be like, "Oh, it's a private account and you're doing this." Unfortunately, journalism and private account doesn't work because you are someone who has to tell the news as it is. And if it's a public interest, it's that.
Yeah.
If it's private, it's private. Like, as I said, my clear-cut example is my DMs with her have not been shared. I would have been very malicious to put those online, for example, because that's unfair. That's completely out of that remit. Instead, it's not. I'm not going to tell you what's like, explicit screenshots of them. We could fight for a while from this, but I think, like, personally speaking, like, where I stand, and I went and had a bit of reflection, I was like, yeah, I'm right about that. And I'm going to be very happy with it. And if you don't agree with me, tell me in the comments, because that's fine as well.
Engagement.
Exactly. A little bit of social media things. Abby, anything else we've got to talk about here?
I don't know. I feel like we've gone over an hour at this point.
Yeah, I think we can
So
end it
much
here.
spilled this episode.
There's going to be a lot more, obviously, on the next episode, which will come in late November as well. So do stay tuned for that, because I imagine that'll be Abby's reaction to Double Exposure more than anything else, because we'll be hearing a lot about that. And oh boy, get yourself some popcorn, because I know price fielders, and Abby is definitely a price fielder, and we're going to see a lot of interesting conversations. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the episode, guys. If you did, one more time again, please do subscribe to the channel, rate the video, share it with your friends, like your comments, etc. Do all the YouTube stuff. It helps the channel, if anything. And again, as well, on the channel, there's tons of stuff, including podcasts, interviews, Life is Strange related stuff. So do go and check that out. It's well worth your time as well. Abby's got music out. Abby's got music videos coming out. She's got things in the works. You can follow her on TikTok, on Instagram, Twitter. It's all in the description. So do follow her as well on there. So Abby, been a pleasure. It's been a while since we've spoken. So we'll be back next month. We'll be next month for a big episode. So until then, guys, take care and stay tuned for the next episode of Fireside with A&A. Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.